We are continuing to go over Section 7 of our typed outline on the Age of Exploration. We're currently going over information about the Pilgrims who established their colony at Plymouth, Massachusetts, and we're about to go over some information to finish up the Pilgrims and then move on to another group of English settlers. So make sure you're using this typed outline to fill in your information while watching the recorded PowerPoints. So what is Miles Standish's connection to these Pilgrims? He is a military captain who organized the Pilgrims to help keep them safe from the natives. The Pilgrims knew that they weren't going to be alone. That'd be pretty naive to think you're going to new land and there wouldn't be anybody there. So to help keep them safe, this man is going to, provide some type of military organization. And that will help keep law and order in Plymouth Colony. So that's all you really have to know about Miles Standish. Now, the Pilgrims have something in common with the settlers of Jamestown. Just like the colony of Jamestown, Plymouth Colony will struggle in the beginning. So we're going to go over some of the reasons, and there's really one main reason why this colony was struggling in the very beginning. We know that the Pilgrims were definitely unprepared for the winter months that they were about to go through. You can see here that many of the colonists during the winter months died from starvation. They just weren't very familiar with the land and they didn't know how to farm that land. So unfortunately, if you're looking at about 120 colonists that started out with the Plymouth colony, the Pilgrims, there were only about 40 left after this winter time. So that lets you know they definitely weren't prepared. And a lot of it had to do with not knowing how to farm that land. Well, luckily for them, the natives in the area of where Plymouth was were much more friendly than in other locations. So the natives are going to teach the Pilgrims about farming and what crops will do well in that area. And so when the Pilgrims had their first harvest of food, they decided to invite the natives to show their appreciation for helping them get to this point. So as you can see here, we celebrate Thanksgiving for the reason of the natives are being thanked by the Pilgrims for helping them with this first harvest so that they could eat. And some of y'all knew that from, again, elementary school, but it's been a while, and so it's a nice little refresher of why we celebrate Thanksgiving. So they gave thanks to the natives for their help, and of course we today give thanks for all of our blessings that we have in our life. So when you study the Pilgrims, make sure you don't get them confused with the Jamestown settlers. What they have in common is that both colonies struggled, but make sure you know it was for different reasons. Okay, so again, please make a point when you study not to confuse the Pilgrims with the Jamestown settlers. You can make a chart of their similarities and differences. That's always a great way to help you study. There's one more group of English settlers that we need to go over that were traveling to the New World, and this group has some similarities to the reasons why the Pilgrims came to the New World. The group that I'm referring to are the Puritans. So you should all be on number 12 on your typed outline. So in 1628, we know that there were thousands of Puritans who left England and came over to the New World and established their colony known as the Massachusetts Bay Colony. So there's one thing they have in common right now with the Pilgrims. They're both in Massachusetts. They're just in different areas. You've got the Pilgrims at Plymouth and the Puritans are at Bay Colony, okay, both in Massachusetts. Another comparison with the Pilgrims and the Puritans is religious reasons for coming to the New World. The Pilgrims wanted to separate from the Anglican Church, the Church of England. The Puritans are leaving England to escape religious persecution. They want to purify, which means change, the Church of England. That's how they got their name Puritans, because you can see here, within Puritans, you can see the word purify. So make sure, again, you don't confuse Pilgrims and Puritans, okay? Puritans want to make changes to the Church of England. You may be wondering, what was it about the Church of England that the Puritans weren't happy with? What did they want to change? Now, you don't have to write this part down that I'm saying out loud, but in case you're curious, I wanted you to know that the Puritans didn't like the Church of England's elaborate worship ceremonies and the way that the churches were highly decorated. They thought that was way too similar to what the Catholic churches did. And this is a group of Protestants, the Puritans are. So they definitely want a more simple worship service and not as elaborated and decorated like the Catholic Church. So they're wanting to cleanse the Church of England, which is Protestant, of some of its Catholic elements, okay? So they came over to the New World because they were being persecuted for their religious differences with the other Protestants that were in England. And so they're going to establish, their own way of worship. They value family, but they definitely are going to have a very strict way of life. They want to, as you can see here on your 12A, they want to establish or create a model Christian community where others might be able to follow. They could almost set an example. Their longtime governor will be John Winthrop. He just kept getting elected over and over as their governor. That's how popular he was. But again, understand that one of the criticisms with the Puritans is that they were not tolerant of other religious practices. Okay, you wouldn't be allowed to join this colony unless you believed what they did and you practiced what they did. So they were very strict with their beliefs, and they definitely did not tolerate other religious practices. So by 1675, we know that there are many different English settlers over in the New World. And it's just going to be a matter of time before some of those English settlers have conflict with some of the natives in the surrounding area. So we have here on your number 13, King Philip's War. So first, make sure you know that this is a war between the English settlers and the Native American Indians, okay? Because the name of the war is very deceiving. So again, I want to make sure y'all understand who's fighting who. This war is going to involve the Native American Indian chief known as Metacom. Now, the English, sometimes we refer to them as the British, so if you see British, just know that's the English. They are going to call him King Philip, because as you can see here from this image, he looked like royalty, and so this is just a name that they made up for him, okay? So that's how it got the name of the war. Well, the reason this group of natives are fighting some of the English settlers is because of land in the New England area, which is basically where Massachusetts is, okay? You hear the New England Patriots, that's basically that Massachusetts area. So unfortunately, the natives are feeling very threatened that they're going to lose that land, and so they are going to attack the English settlers. Unfortunately for the natives, we know that they lost this King Philip's War and were forced more westward towards the Mississippi River. Maybe not that far, but in that direction. Okay, so they definitely had to leave the New England area because they lost the war. So with the natives out of that area, what happens is more and more English settlers are coming over to the New World. And we know by the year, I'm really jumping ahead in history, by 1776, the English will establish 13 colonies along the east coast, you can see here, of North America. So in American history, you go over each of those colonies in detail. But here in Global Insights, we just mentioned Virginia, and we mentioned the colonists of Massachusetts. But that's really it, because there's no reason to go over every single colony in this class. But just know that with the natives, pushed out of this area, more and more English are able to settle and establish a colony. And these colonies, as you can see, are all along the Atlantic coast. So when we first began this section of Roman numeral 7, we were talking about different groups looking for the Northwest Passage, hoping to find a quicker route from Europe over to Asia. We talked about the English, and we've talked about the French looking for this passage. The third group of people are the Dutch. Remember, they come from the Netherlands or Holland. They're going to end up colonizing the area of where New York is today. Of course, it's going to take some time to do that. So I'm going to start with a man who is looking for the Northwest Passage on behalf of the Dutch. And that man is pictured here, Henry Hudson. So you can find him on your number 15, little a, after, of course, you filled in the first part of 15 with the Dutch and New York. What we know about Henry Hudson is he was actually an Englishman who explored for the Dutch. Again, more than likely it was the Dutch that gave him the funding for this trip to search for the Northwest Passage. We know that in this attempt to look for the Northwest Passage, he is going to discover 3 different waterways that will be named in his honor. The Hudson River, the Hudson Bay, and the Hudson Strait. So all of these are in and around the New York area. Now, what's interesting is while Hudson and his men were searching for the Northwest Passage, Hudson was very motivated about, establishing this goal. But the men were growing very impatient and tired and wanting to turn back because they hadn't found anything yet. Well, like I said, they are going to be at odds with Hudson because Hudson is determined to find this passage. Well, unfortunately for Hudson, his crew will stage a mutiny. You will find this on 15 little b, so you can write this information down about the mutiny. So we know that Hudson is a victim of mutiny by his crew. So what the crew did was they clearly are against Hudson continuing this voyage. So they took Hudson and his son, placed them into a small little lifeboat, and set them out into the water. And unfortunately, Hudson and his son were never heard from again. So clearly the men have turned against Hudson, and he ends up being a victim of mutiny. I'm getting to the end of this video, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll continue on with the next video and the next part of your typed outline.